So thank you very much. I love public speaking, even more so when you have to follow 2 standing ovations as well. Oh, thanks, yeah. Yeah, I'm just getting that in at the start, so you know to do it at the end. And what I have to say, particularly with Orla's one, what I loved about Orla is that she just named it. And when you name it, it makes a world of difference. There's an old adage in psychotherapy, you're only as sick as your secrets. And it's amazing when you admit something, someone else goes, oh yeah, I feel like that way too. And it frees up an awful lot of headspace. So we're running a little bit over time, so I've kind of cut a few slides, but I'll be here for the whole day if anybody wants to chat to me about anything. So I'm here to give you an understanding of how to manage fibro. So I'm not going to get into the explanations, we've already done all that, and I'm sure you probably know the day-to-day of living with it. So I'm going to go through my story, understanding the 3 Ps, primary and secondary pain, breaking the pain cycle, taking a multidisciplinary approach, noting where do I start, getting back to work, take the leap forward, which is the program that we're developing at the moment that Ursula mentioned earlier, how to let go, finding the rainbow, because believe it or not, with crisis comes opportunity. I know it mightn't feel like it, and you do have to be at a certain stage in the illness. I remember one counsellor telling me it was a gift, and if I had had the strength to pick up the chair and throw it at her, I would have. You do definitely have to be at a certain stage before you can recognise that. So just to give you a little bit about my story, it took 22 years for me to get a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. It's a long time. And then it took another 7 years to get a treatment plan that helped ameliorate my symptoms. Now, I would like to emphasise, I'm not cured, I'm managing. And it doesn't take much for me to flare up. Orla mentioned a routine, going to bed at 9 o'clock and doing things consistently. I'm very much like that. I'm basically like a grown-up toddler. I need to be fed and napped at regular basis, and I need my routine. Now, one of the difficulties I had was that I had very severe reactions to medications. And unfortunately, the response from the medical profession was, oh, you're a difficult patient. And I would like to see this change to, we're not difficult patients, we are actually patients with a very, very difficult illness to live with. So I would come from a long line of creaking doors. Everybody on my mother's side is banjaxed. We live forever, that's the good news. We'll be around for a while, but we are quite banjaxed. So I would come from the people who have a genetic component, but there's many different avenues to developing fibromyalgia. So we talked a lot about the physical symptoms, but for me, my currency was always that, you know, I was good at academia and I was the smart one in the family and I was the one that sorted things out. So the biggest difficulty for me was actually coping with the cognitive difficulties. So about 12 years ago, I was really, really bad. Not able to finish sentences, not able to find words. So I'm sure we're all only too familiar with fibrofog. So you can see a list of the cognitive symptoms there, and they're quite extensive. And I have the phrase there, I'm off my trolley. I'm not actually being politically incorrect. There was an incident when I was just going to the shops, and it was really just to get out of the house more than anything else. And I actually couldn't remember the word trolley. And I sat down on a bench going, come on, you know what it is. It's the metal thing with the wheels that you put the food in. And I had to actually go up to a shop assistant and ask him. Now, luckily, I've been diagnosed for a fair bit with this, and I have a bit of a warped sense of humour. That's what kind of gets me through everything. So I just said to him, you know, the metal thing with the wheels that you put the food in, can you get me one of those? But because I was relaxed and calm about it, you know, he saw the funny side. So how you deliver information to people is really, really important. So my motivation for being here, because I could very happily skip off into the sunset and not hear the F word ever again, but I want early diagnosis for people. I don't want anybody to have to go through what I went through. For years I was told, oh, you're just a lovely girl, you're just a little bit stressed out and a bit of a worrier, and if you just, you know, learn to chill out, you'd be grand. I also want personalised medicine, and this has come up throughout the morning, that we are all very different and we need individual tailored treatment. And the other thing as well, because at Fibro Ireland we really listen to patients, and we're always looking for feedback, because it's not about what we think you want. We want to know what you want, and we want to deliver it for you. the all-encompassing story coming back is that people aren't being given comprehensive treatment plans. They're being given a diagnosis, they're being given meds, and they're left to go home to their own devices. And we want something better for you guys. We want not only a comprehensive treatment plan, but we want someone to help you maintain that. And Orla was very right when she said, it's the long game. There's no quick fixes, and slow but steady wins the race when it comes to fibromyalgia. So let's talk a little bit about the 3 Ps. So I already mentioned the genetic jackpot that I hit. So predisposition is genetics, being female, personality traits, and early trauma. And there's a lot coming through with early trauma. Now, there was a researcher called Val Bogan that we're working with now. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it here today. And we're going to be developing a big research project with her. And there's a very good book called Why Love Matters by Sue Gerhardt. And in that, she actually shows that when you experience trauma as a child, you actually grow extra nerve endings. Now, this is great if you're in a stressful household and you need that 30 seconds to realise it's all kicking off and I need to get out of here. But then what happens when you're grown up and you're out and about and you're trying to drive down the M50 and you're nearly leaping off the chair every time someone honks a horn? So you have to learn how to slow down your central nervous system. So then there's precipitating factors. So there are events that precede the onset of fibromyalgia, and they represent a change in situation either biologically or environmentally, and they are quite identifiable. I'm sure we all know that key moment where just the cheese just slid off the cracker. So we were ticking along and then vump, and we just never quite fully recovered from that. So in my case, it was a knee injury. And then I was told to go swimming for the knee injury, and then they got pneumonia. And then the doctor didn't diagnose pneumonia for a year. I was just stressed and worried, even though I was white as a sheet and had a permanent cough. And then there's perpetuating factors. So these are factors which can stop us from improving unless addressed. And they erode and they destroy the efforts being made by the person, their family, and their doctor in overcoming fibromyalgia. So I was in a job I didn't particularly like. Living with a high maintenance drama queen, that definitely doesn't help. And then the area I was living in, I'm not going to name it because I don't want emails about how dare you say that about where I live, but it's actually very important where you live. And what I found out is I need to live by the sea. I always blossom when I live by the sea. So, and then I need somewhere that's not too damp and too boggy and too low-lying as well. Okay, so that's perpetuating. Now, so we're going to talk a little bit about the pain cycle. So the orange one, it's quite a vicious physical circle, and you can see there you're in pain, so there's avoidance activity. That leads to progressive deconditioning. Then pain with decreasing activity, that also comes along. And then there's further activity avoidance, which leads to further deconditioning. And we've heard people talk about sore muscles, not being able to coordinate, and kind of weight gain as well. And then you see then that loops into a psychological vicious circle. So you, anger, anxiety, fear and distress, that can feed into depression, that feeds into poor sleep, and then that gives you an increased perception of pain. And you just keep going around in this permanent loop, and it can be quite hard to break. And then particularly in your circumstances as well, like I mentioned earlier about environment and kind of, that goes for the people in your life as well. And I would be quite ruthless in that people are either part of the problem or they're part of the solution. If they're part of the solution, they can stay. If they're part of the problem, they need to go. Okay, so the definition of stress. So Hansel in 1936 defined it as the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. We are not designed for long-term stress, and unfortunately modern living is not great for that. And then there's also the additional stress that happens from illness. So there's pain or discomfort from symptoms, managing and explaining the condition. Now this can be really, really tough. And what we want to see happening is we want to see consultants actually explaining to family members just what's involved, because I don't think family members are taking it on board when the patient actually says that. Has anybody found that when they went home after a diagnosis and said, the first thing they go is fibromy what? And then they go, oh, that's the one where it's just all in your head kind of thing, and all you need to just do is chill out. Now, adjusting to new limitations. Now, unfortunately, I don't have an off switch, and I would have an A-type personality, and then combine that with low serotonin, it's a bit of a lethal combination. So I have to learn I can't do everything. Then there's increased financial pressure, and this is the bit that really concerns me, and this is why I do this, is that fibromyalgia can be a bottomless pit of money. And you just go around in circles trying everything, each one more expensive than the next, and not actually getting the results for the money that you're paying out. So there can be feelings of fear, frustration, confusion, or isolation, and that's actually just the doctors. So then there's relationship and work issues, because it does kind of reach out and grasp at every aspect of your life. So how do you beat stress? So one of the things is you have to be aware of what's happening. So the B stands for body, the physical symptoms of stress. Now, I would be quite tunnel visioned. I used to work in graphic design. If I had to stay up 24 hours to get a job done, I would get it done even if it killed me, and I wouldn't listen to my body. So because I wasn't listening to my body, it really had to ramp up the signals, because I'm so determined I have to be clubbed over the head several times before I'll actually down tools and not do something. Then there's the emotions. What do you feel when you're under stress? Now, I grew up in a household where everything was grand, so I actually have a mismatch between the information I'm getting. So the information I'm getting is actually everything isn't grand, but the message that I was given up here was everything is grand. So that can actually create a conflict, and it can make it difficult for you to actually interpret stimuli correctly. And then the actions, what do you do under stress? So as I said, I used to work in graphic design, and my boss knew the state of his company by the amount of chocolate wrappers around my computer desk and the amount of Lucozade bottles as well. Cake and Ben & Jerry's and sugar would have been my action under stress, which is actually the worst thing you can do for fibro. You need to ditch the sugar. And then what are the thoughts? What thoughts go through a stressed mind? And those are things that, that's where CBT comes in, and you need to do a bit of work around that. Now, there's a lot of emphasis on CBT. What CBT is just a facet. It's going to help you cope with the symptoms, but it's not going to cure the symptoms. And this is something we need to kind of have trickle down to the medical profession as well, because they think, oh, you just do a bit of graded exercise and a bit of CBT and Bob's your uncle, you'll be grand. But there's a bit more to it than that. Now, it's really important that you become aware of crashing characteristics. So this is a person who ignores the body's signals, puts health last, doesn't know their limits, puts other people's needs first, pushes themselves to get things done, has many demanding and toxic people in their life, denies having a chronic long-term illness, and has a rock and roll energy with no ability to plan ahead. So can anybody relate to that list at all? Yeah. That actually describes my week this week. So, and with regards to toxic people, my mantra is not my monkeys, not my circus. So you need to make that your mantra as well. So observe, don't absorb, just leave it over there, because people with fibromyalgia are actually very giving and very caring and very quick to kind of dive in. Sort out your own stuff first and leave the stuff to other people. There's a very good counselling piece called The Work by Katie Byron, and she says there's 3 types of business. There's your business, my business, and God's business. And all you need to do is stay in your business, and that cuts out a lot of stuff as well. But again, it kind of takes practice. So this is where you want to get to. You want to switch this into managing characteristics. So listens to the body's signals, puts health first, knows their limits, feels comfortable saying no to others, paces themselves to get things done, has chosen supportive people and eliminated toxic people from their life, understands how to manage illness, has learned to manage their energy now, and can plan ahead and manage activities. This is a very important concept for when you're living with a chronic long-term condition, and it comes from Buddhism. So it's called primary and secondary pain. So primary suffering, so these are the actual unpleasant sensations in the body. So this would be pain and fatigue. So there's about 60 symptoms with fibromyalgia, but these would be the main ones. Then we have secondary suffering. So this is resistance to the sensations that occur, and this would be mentally, physically, and emotionally. And it's basically how we react to things. So I have to deal with the pain and the fatigue, but I don't have to deal with all the emotional stuff that goes with that. So I had a cool exercise with shoe boxes, which actually shows my slight addiction to shoes. That's the other way how I cope with things. And unfortunately, we don't have time to do it, but I'm sure I get to do it at another workshop with you. So it's very important to remember that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. So a lot of people say emotional things like, people are going to leave me, I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to end up homeless. This is all emotional stuff. This is stuff you don't have to actually deal with. You just have to deal with pain and fatigue. So you need to let go of secondary suffering. And secondary suffering usually manifests itself through blocking and drowning. So blocking is when you're hardened to things, you become angry and you become bitter. And the other one is you become overwhelmed. So drowning, you're literally drowning in the emotions. And this is where addictions come in. And there is a lot of addictions with chronic pain. You know, there's addictions to medications, foods, alcohols. Facebook is another one as well. I'm always giving out to people about sleep hygiene. It's like, I can see you were on Facebook at 12 o'clock last night. It's not a good idea. I want people in bed by 9 o'clock. So how do we go about breaking the pain cycle? So we need to take a multidisciplinary approach, and this was echoed by our two speakers earlier on. So there's mechanical issues, and this would be to do with your spine, hypermobility, TMJ and Morton's foot, and I'll explain those in a minute. And then you've biochemical stuff, so that would be your diet, environmental toxins and medication. And then the emotional part is very important. So self-care, CBT, letting go and sleep hygiene. So let's have a look at the mechanical issues. So fibromyalgia never comes by itself. You usually see something like a scoliosis or a whiplash. So I actually have a scoliosis. Now it's a mild one of scoliosis as go. I have a condition called Sherman's disease. So instead of my vertebrae being nice and smooth, they're actually quite jaggy and they're fused in the thoracic area. And because they're fused in the thoracic area, it means my diaphragm doesn't work properly. So for years I was actually using my shoulders to breathe. So that meant I was overworking these muscles, and there's a really important pump in the diaphragmatic area, and that actually helps pump stuff around the body, and it also helps you de-stress as well. And we have the wonderful Denise Curtis who will be doing 2 workshops on that later on, and I'd highly recommend you consider how you breathe. Now the next one is a condition, now for me it was called benign hypermobility. And I'd just like to say there's absolutely nothing benign about it. And I actually think this is what's causing the bulk of my problems. So I'll just show you a little party trick. So see how far I can bend my finger backwards. Now you shouldn't be able to bend your finger back that far. Now I've worked with people who could actually bend their finger back that far. And I'm not double jointed. You can be hypermobile all over or just in bits and parts. So basically with hypermobility, it means you're more prone to injury. So I used to play loads of racket sports. I loved badminton, tennis and squash, but I was like the Terminator going on court, and like Orla mentioned, injuries and stuff like that. So basically what happens is if I'm even just turning a door, my wrist actually just keeps going. And I remember when the rheumatologist was diagnosing this, and he was bending my body like a pretzel. I was like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I could have been having lots of fun over the years and I didn't know I could do that. But it leaves you more prone to lung conditions like asthma and chest infections, but also IBS as well. And IBS is a big problem. But also people with hypermobility, the amygdala is that little bit bigger as well. So we're hypersensitive. We're like, you know, the little meerkats that are just constantly on the lookout as well, and that served a purpose. You know, hundreds of years ago we were the one in the village that stayed awake and warned everybody, but I don't know about you, I'd actually like to let the village look after themselves and get a good night's sleep. Now another one is TMJ. So if you look at the picture of the jaw there, so I was actually waking up with migraines. So I go to bed okay and then wake up with a banging migraine, and just here around the jaw area will be very sore. Anybody in the room experience that? Yeah, it's quite... Yeah. Did you get the mouth guard? Yeah.
There was nothing. And it was all...
Yeah, it's very painful, so it is. And it can lead to other problems as well. So it's very important you get it resolved. So basically I got a mouth guard done a few years back. A very glamorous contraption that you put in your mouth before you go to bed. But basically it's a splint that keeps the mouth shut, and it also helps with snoring as well. Now you have to, it's really important you get this addressed too, because you can actually be doing an awful lot of damage. But when you grind, you're actually placing 300 pounds of pressure on your jaw, and you're releasing stress chemicals as well. So even though it sounds, like I'm just doing a bit of grinding, it's really important you get it sorted. And there's a really good book called Your Body Speaks Your Mind by Deb Shapiro. We have a copy of it over on the Fibro Ireland stand if anybody wants to look at it. And basically it says grinding is you're saying all the things that you're not saying during the day. So I would have been the peacekeeper, would have been very nice. So obviously I was at night going, you know, kind of with all the things I could say. So the more you express yourself during the day, the better chance you have of resolving that as well. So the physical and the emotional, it's very much, you know, which came first, the chicken or the egg. The two very much feed into each other. Now the next picture of the feet, I would like to state these are not my feet. I just wanted to show you an extreme example of Morton's foot. Now I do have Morton's foot, but you can't drive a truck between my big toe and my second toe. So basically this is a mechanical issue of the foot, and if your foot's off, it's like a domino effect. It actually works the whole way up. Now I have every single one of these things that are mechanical issues, and I'll take you back to what I said earlier about my doctor's diagnosis. Asher, you're a lovely girl, just stop stressing. So again, one of the reasons why I do this is I'm very concerned that people are not being listened to, and they're not being examined properly, and they're not being given basic mechanical help that can solve an awful lot of pain and stress issues. So they're the mechanical issues. So what kind of treatments can you get? So a chiropractor, there's a very gentle one called Timony chiropractor, which will be about the gentlest, but you do have to be careful with chiropractic work. If you're in the throes of fibromyalgia, I wouldn't get it done. It's just a little bit too harsh. I think osteopathy is a much gentler way to go. Has anybody had osteopathy done? And do you find it helpful? Yeah, it's very gentle, and again, it's slow but steady. Get a good physio. So I was very lucky. I was trying loads of things and nothing was working. And then I had this physio, this would have been about 12 years ago, who trained in the States. And she was basically like a Nazi. She just kept me, you know, on the straight and narrow. But she combined nutrition with physio as well. And she was very encouraging, because I remember we had one session that was really tough, and all I could do was just 2 minutes of exercise, and it felt so pathetic, it really did. And she just goes, well, you know, that's 1 more minute than you did last week, and in 18 months' time we'll get you up to an hour. Now 18 months seems a long time where you're at the start of it, but it actually flew in, and she was right. But also around self-awareness, I didn't actually realise how much I was eating. You know, every time you have a cup of tea, you have a biscuit, and then you're having 6 or 7 cups of tea as well. So a food diary actually made me very aware just of how much I was eating. Shiatsu is amazing, and we were very lucky that shiatsu.ie, which is a shiatsu college, did a program with us for 18 months. And the difference in the people getting the shiatsu, and some of them still continue to get it done today, it's very gentle and very nurturing. So anything with fibro, you have to go slow and it has to be gentle. Frequency-specific microcurrent treatment is another excellent treatment. Orla actually had that done, and if anybody wants to ask her about that. And Denise Curtis is actually the practitioner who does it, and she's here as well. And it's particularly good for people who've been in car accidents. Lymphatic drainage, you know, if you're swollen and all that, that's very good for that. Now, myofascial release, this is really good for fibromyalgia, and my physio actually did this one on me. So there's basically like a sock around the muscle, and with fibro, it's like the sock has shrunk in the wash. So the myofascial release, what it does is it stretches it out, it gives the fibres space to breathe, and it helps the blood flow as well. I wouldn't recommend dry needling unless you absolutely have to get it done. It's excruciating. So I had a problem with my neck, so I can turn my neck fully now, but at one stage that's as far as I could turn my neck. So basically it's along the same lines as acupuncture, except they go in deeper. They go into the knot in the muscle, and they basically wiggle that needle until the muscle releases. So your physio needs a soundproof room, because they'll hear the screams quite far with that one. The bone technique is lovely. It works on just gently relaxing the fibre muscles. It's very gentle. It's just like a very gentle rocking motion. It's very good for people who are in the throes of fibromyalgia and just need something gentle and nurturing. Acupuncture has mixed results, works wonderfully for some people, does nothing for other people. Personally myself, I don't like needles, so it didn't really work for me, but I've heard fantastic outcomes from people who've used acupuncture. Reflexology is lovely, particularly, you know, if you've head to toe pain and you just feel it's too much for someone to be touching your body. But research has shown the reflexology is actually great for sleep. And again, interesting enough, the lighter the reflexology, the better the results. So the Alexander technique is a technique that actually helps you with your walking and your posture. And we've been getting good results from feedback from people with that as well. Okay, so we need to look at how we can get you moving. So movement helps release dopamine. Graded exercise, so you don't start off doing a marathon. Now, I'm not built for running, so I would walk, and I've done the mini marathon a couple of times, and I'm usually fine till I get to the 6K mark, and then I swell up like the Michelin Man. So you need to find out what your threshold is. So I can comfortably walk 5K and I won't have any symptoms, but if I go over 5K, I will have symptoms. Dance to your favourite song, you know, get your groove on, get your happy tape, and have that at the start of your day. I will be showing a bit about Tai Chi later on. You need to do kind of different exercises at different stages of your life, and Tai Chi is the one that I've found that's really worked for me. Having sex is also good as well. We won't have any workshops on that today, I'm afraid. That's another conference. So salsa dancing is great. I remember my rheumatologist recommending salsa dancing, and I was like, ah, come on, seriously. But it is actually great, and they do salsa classes that are modified for people with arthritis and fibromyalgia. And basically for the hour, because of the music and the interaction, you actually forget. Now you might pay for it the next day, but it's worth it just to have that hour of interaction. And laughing is really important. Yeah, so the laughing helps release that diaphragm and get it moving as well, and it oxygenates the body as well. So that's around getting moving. So raising your chi. I'm just going to go through this quite quickly because I'm just aware of time. So I'm going to go to the bottom bit. There can be no regulation without observation. Now, when you sat down in that chair, did you think about how you sat down in that chair, or did you just plonk yourself down in the chair? Are you going to think about how you get up out of that chair? So you need to think about thought, movement, shape, rhythm, and change. How you move your body, how you interact in the world, awareness. It's all key to recovery, and I'll be covering that in my workshop. So diet is huge. You need to limit your intake of carbohydrates. 30% of people with fibromyalgia are also hypoglycemic. I was carried out of mass more times than I walked out as a child, and that was because of the fasting. Yet my parents still bought me every Sunday just for the crack. So I also get hangry. Does anybody here get hangry? Yeah. So I always have snacks. I have about 8 snacks in my bag as an emergency situation. So you need to keep your blood sugar stable. So diets to consider: anti-candida, low oxalate, Stone Age paleo, and FODMAPs. And we've some information on some of them out on the Fibro Ireland thing. Now the best thing is to keep a food diary and know what works for you and what doesn't. The tests are just expensive and they're not entirely conclusive. So you just have to be your own health detective. It takes a bit longer, it's a bit more effort, but you'll get better results. So the supplements that are helpful are CQ10, fish oils, vitamin D, vitamin B, magnesium, zinc, calcium, selenium, iron, and probiotics. And these slides will be available, so don't worry if you're missing out on anything. Now, recommended books: Fibromyalgia Health Diet and Guide and Cookbook by McCrindle and Bested. It's a brilliant book, and it does a fantastic explanation of the illness and how you can manage it at the start. But then it actually does a week-to-week kind of diary for you as well. And The Medicinal Chef by Dale Pinnock. There's actually wonderful recipes in that, and you wouldn't actually feel that you were being hard done by going on that. So we recognised that there was difficulties for people, and where do I start with nutrition, and what do I make, and what's easy and what's available. So we set up a closed group called Fibro Fridge, and it's actually working out really well. Do we have any Fibro Fridgers here? Yeah. So it helps you make better food choices, share ideas for breakfast, snack, lunch and dinner, and get the support and find the best food. And it's not us telling you what to do, it's a community where people go, oh look, I got this here and I made this. So it's encouraging and supportive. And it also means you're not alone when you're trying to figure out something. So I'm going to skip through the medications. We all know what the medications are. Personally myself, I didn't find them that great and they actually made me worse. I'm doing quite well on a drug called LDN, but it's a slow burner. It took about 8 months in conjunction with major lifestyle changes. It's not a magic bullet, it's something you do in conjunction with something else. So sleep, this is the key to managing fibromyalgia. So I have a design background. So what I did was I said, right, where do we start? I put all the pieces together. What is stopping me from sleeping? So chronic back pain was stopping me from sleeping. So I focused on physio first, then I did the nutrition, and then I did all the counselling stuff. So with regard to sleep, no caffeine after 4 p.m, no liquids after 7, because I have a bionic bladder. So as long as I don't drink anything after 7 p.m, I'm actually okay and I'll sleep through the night. It was actually my bladder that was waking me up. I have my dad to thank for that, so he does that too. Bedroom is only for the 3 S's, sleep, sex and being sick. No devices in the bedroom at all. Get yourself an analog digital clock and have it in the corner. And then also have the alarm clock on the far side of the room. Don't keep hitting the snooze button. So establish a regular go to bed time. Change your stress to enjoy the rest. I'm sure we've all done that. 3 a.m, we're wide awake and we're tossing and turning and we're getting annoyed because we know we're going to have a rubbish day because we've had a bad night. So what you say to yourself, isn't this lovely? No one is asking me to do anything. I have this peace and quiet to myself. Now it sounds very simple, but it is actually a game changer. So dump your day. So pick 15 minutes to worry, moan and rant, write it all down and then throw it in the bin and then park it. Exercise but not close to bedtime. If you're not asleep within 20 minutes, get up. You need to be sleepy when you're in bed. No heavy meals before bedtime. Is snoring or sleep apnea a problem? Please get sleep apnea checked out. We're seeing more and more people being diagnosed with it. So counselling and CBT. So cognitive behavioural therapy, that looks at your cognitions, which are your thoughts and how they affect your behaviour. It deals with the here and now. It sets realistic goals. So SMART goals are, it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic, and it's timed. And one of the big things with fibro is we don't have realistic expectations of yourself. So I could decide, you know, I want to be the next prima donna ballerina in the Russian Corpse Ballet. It's not going to happen. But if I say, you know, I'm going to walk 2 miles at the weekend, that's doable. So you need to keep it realistic. Identify your triggers. You probably are getting triggers, but you're ignoring them, and everybody's triggers are unique. Recognise the early warning signs. Have a health maintenance plan. Understand dysfunctional thought patterns, and again, these will be unique to everybody, and counteract negative automatic thoughts as well. So you need to separate facts from feelings. So for example, feelings might be, I'm not good enough, but let me look at the facts. Oh wait, everybody in work likes what I do, I get on well with everybody. So that's how you counteract, they're called NATs, N-A-T, negative automatic thoughts. And we're hoping to launch a low-cost counselling service in June. And we have Bernie, who's been manning the stand outside. If anybody has any questions around that, she'll be one of the counsellors. And they've all been trained in how to work with people with fibromyalgia as well.
What is it, online telephone?
You can go to her, or it can be Skype, or it can be telephone, whichever is handiest for you, and each individual counsellor will work it out with you. Okay, so that's great, but where do I start? So consider how personal relationships are affecting management of health. And again, I would recommend identifying, are people part of the problem or part of the solution? And if you make a decision to remove yourself from a situation, it's not selfish, it's self-care. And if ever you hear the word selfish coming up, just remind yourself about the self-care part. Designate a partner in wellness. This is very important. So my physio kept me on track. And I was too brain foggy to follow a recipe. So luckily my mum was a great cook and she sorted out my nutrition for me. Prioritise symptoms and deal with the most troubled ones first. Get a good healthcare team in place. So you need a GP, you need a consultant, a manual therapist and a counsellor. And remember, action before motivation. So this is very important. This was actually my physio's mantra. You mightn't feel like doing something, but do it. You'll feel better after it. I'm sure we would have all rather stayed in bed and had a lie on, or for those of you who had long trips, but I think it's been worth the trip. What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'll all go home feeling better. Yeah. So back to work mistakes. Don't take enough time off and return too quickly. Went back full time instead of a phased return. Return to a job that was making them sick instead of changing jobs. haven't identified triggers in work, haven't identified supports in work, people with fibromyalgia generally don't ask for help. Worry about returning to work instead of planning to return to work. This is the number one thing I see. People in a state of panic of what's going to happen when I go back to work, but they don't actually have a plan. And they haven't organised nutrition or gentle exercise to help get them through the day, or they're actually on the wrong medication. And as we can see, there can be a lot of trial and error before we get the right medication. So these are some apps that can help. There's one called Ergonomics, and it reminds you to get up and move about, particularly if you're doing computer work. For the women in the room, and actually the men on the room might want to download this as well, P-Tracker monitors your monthly cycle, and I never have a meeting when I have one on, because it's easier to handle conflict when you're not hormonal as well. So it's a free app called P-Tracker. Now you might even need to retrain, like my background is actually in graphic design, and now I teach disabled adults literacy, and I teach cyber safety to children. So it's much nicer work than what I was doing beforehand. So LNL is the network that you do for that. Now have a plan B if you're having a flare. So, sorry, I'm just aware of time, so I'm going to have to skip through this one. Now take the leap forward. So this is a pilot program. We've done phase 1, we've gotten the feedback, and we're adapting it for phase 2. If you're interested, go to the Fibro Ireland desk outside, and we put your name down and let you know when the next one is on. But basically it focuses on my movement, cycle of change, mapping the patient journey, nutrition, sleep, but it helps you put together a personalised treatment plan. So it gives you a starting point. This is the redesign of the new Fibro Ireland website. It was supposed to be ready this week, but my father very selfishly decided to get heart bypass surgery. So that's going to be put off until May 21st. So hopefully we'll have it ready by then. I'm going to skip that one. Now, this is a really important one, letting go. So I want you to consider the acronym FAST. Forgiveness, okay? Now, we've talked about trauma, and there's a lot of trauma in the room. So forgiveness isn't about saying what's happened is okay. It's about saying I'm going to let go of it, and I'm not going to give any more energy to it. It's not about making it okay for the other person. And then acceptance is about saying this is where I'm at. You know, a lot of people find it difficult to accept that they have a chronic long-term illness. So acceptance isn't about giving in, it's about acknowledging this is where I am at this moment in time. And then surrender, you never know what will happen. Like, it really, really was difficult for me to ask for help. I'd nearly rather cut off my arm than ask for help. But I left it too late before I asked for help. So don't. I mean, people with fibromyalgia are so quick to help other people as well. So it's always easier to be the helper than the helpee, but sometimes we need to be helped. And then also remember, that's life. Everybody has something, no one gets off scot-free. So it's very important to learn to let go, because bitterness and anger are two key emotions that actually make fibromyalgia symptoms worse. So let's have a look at the rainbow. So how can crisis become an opportunity? So I knew I needed to leave my job, I knew I needed to move, and I knew I needed to get out of a relationship. But I was faffing around for ages, and I got clubbed over the head by fibromyalgia, and that made the decision that I had to go. So in a way, in a very difficult roundabout way, fibromyalgia actually helped me make that decision. So discover the real you. So I actually don't like driving in a car, I don't like noisy crowds, and I don't like public speaking, but I seem to be doing rather a lot of it lately. But what I discovered is I can actually do it, whereas I would have been a big chicken beforehand and said, no, there's no way I can do that. So find the courage you never knew you had. So I think fibromyalgia is probably the worst thing that you can have. So the worst has already happened, so everything else is easy after this. So just remind yourself of that. It can lead to a deeper connection in relationships. And again, back to Orla's thing about, you know, just naming it, this is where I'm at. So when we're honest and authentic, that's when real intimacy happens. So try something new. So since being diagnosed, I've tried kickboxing and salsa and various other things that I never thought I would have tried. And I would say I'm actually living a fuller life. I was definitely in a suburban rut, you know, work, sleep. I'm not actually engaging. So to conclude, recognize the cycle of pain, let go of secondary pain. You are what you eat, think and do, so be mindful of what you eat, think and do. It'll have major implications for your symptoms. Find a partner in wellness. This can be your other half or a family member or even a healthcare practitioner. Get a personalised treatment plan, and it has to be personalised because we're all different. Do a phased return to work and have a plan. Reconnect with yourself and your loved ones, and remember to find your rainbow. I know it doesn't feel like it, but trust me, it is out there. So thank you very much for your time.